Welcome to the KISC My Health Radio show series on Building Fortunes Radio. KISC My Health is brought to you by the universally recognized Cranberry King, Captain Cranman, Stephen Lukawski. Over the past 30 years, Stephen has worked with North American dietary supplement companies in the nutraceutical industry. His efforts and connections generate ingredient sales through innovative delivery systems and effective marketing and brand management strategies. Today on KISC My Health, Stephen is joined by guest host Peter Mingils. Make sure you check out previous KISC My Health episodes at www.buildingfortunesradio.com or KISCMyHealth.com. Along with our marketing partners, we are here to help our customers improve their health, build their businesses, and make the world a better place. At KISC My Health, we know how much your health and your business means to you and the people important to you. So spread the word. Tell another friend. Join our newsletter and go make a difference in your world. Now, on to our show with your hosts, Captain Cranman and Peter Mingils. Take it away, Peter.
Hello, everyone. Peter Mingils here. You are listening to our KISC My Health Radio show on the Building Fortunes Radio Network. For those people unfamiliar with my voice, again, my name is Peter Mingils. We've been doing this for a super-duper long time, way before Stephen Lukawski started our radio show with KISC My Health, but I'm going to kind of give you the little bit of the origin of it, how this whole thing worked, because it kind of all fits. A long time ago when I started Building Fortunes Radio, I had a special guest host. His name is Attorney Jim Turner. He was over in Washington, D.C., was one of the original Ralph Nader Raiders, and a lot of you haven't heard that name for a super-duper long time, but Ralph Nader was around, and in 1993, Jim Turner started Citizens for Health. Citizens.org is still the domain name, and they were a consumer advocacy group and then some. So we did radio shows every Friday at noon for over a decade. Some of the best because Jim was a great lawyer as well as a great educator, and then all of a sudden he passed away. And when he passed away in January of 2022, it left a hole in my heart. Anybody who's ever had a mentor knows, like, well, oh man, I'd always call Jim for this, or I was always interested in Jim's wisdom and his knowledge and his information, and now he's gone. So I begged the people over at Citizens to find me a replacement. It took them a little bit over a year. I did replays during that whole entire time. They found me a great man. His name is James Gormley, and that's the beginning of the hint of how this radio show got started. James was a publisher. He became president of Citizens for Health, and overall a really super good guy. We did radio shows starting in January of 2024 until he called me up and he said, well, when we were talking one day about the radio shows, he said, can I have a special guest? And I said, of course. He says, I want to bring a gentleman on. His name is Stephen Lukawski, and I didn't know who Stephen was. I wasn't in the same environment that many of you are, so I didn't know who he was. I'm like, okay, well, tell me about Stephen Lukawski. He's like, he's the King of Cranberries. I'm like, okay. He's like, the Captain Cranman. I'm like, okay, sounds like fun. And he's a gentleman that really has been selling these natural ingredients forever. I want to bring him on. I'm working with him. I said, great. So Stephen and I, I did the radio show basically spinning the stuff on the back end, and James Gormley had the conversation. And after an hour and a half, I was totally amazed with what's going on with cranberries and Stephen and everything else. He had a LinkedIn, so I joined his LinkedIn, and for the next couple of months, I was actually like forming that social media relationship with Stephen Lukawski. He would send out posts, and they were always really positive and great, and you guys all know that. I found him to be fun and creative and very positive. And then in August of 2024, James Gormley suddenly passed away. I did the right thing. I called people that I knew him, and the first guy I think I called was Stephen, and he already knew because he was working with him. And, of course, the conversation went to, we have to do a memorial for James Gormley. I agree completely because he was a great man, and the world needs to remember who he was. Somewhere in that conversation, I mentioned something about KISC. KISC. It's my Keep It Simple circle. It's stuff I've been training on to help people keep themselves focused and avoid distractions like forever. And Stephen jumped in and he says, you know what we're going to do, Peter? I said, no, what's that, Stephen? He said, we're going to run a KISC My Health radio show. I said, really? And he jumped in and he says, I know a lot of other people besides James Gormley, and we're going to interview these people and find out about their personal backgrounds and do all this sort of stuff. And he was so excited about it. I'm like, I'm all in. So I bought KISCMyHealth.com for the domain name. And I said, Stephen, for me, KISC stands for Keep It Simple Circle. What does KISC for you stand for? And he said, well, it's going to stand for key influencers, super champions. And anybody who's ever seen Captain Cranman from Planet Cranberry, you know what that looks like. And I said, yeah, let's do it. So we've been doing these radio shows ever since, and they are great. You'll find them on, besides KISCMyHealth.com, you'll find them on Bill and Fortunes Radio, Humongous Radio. You'll find them on Amazon, Spotify, all the other big ones and small ones, you know, whatever, Apple's podcast. You'll find them all over the place because they are. But I'm always happy to say thank you for Stephen Lukawski putting this together. Thanks for our corporate sponsors, previous as well as future ones as well. Thanks to our active and our passive listeners. Our passive listeners listen in, and they love it, and our active listeners listen in, and they love it, and they share it with other people. But I really want to say also thank you to Stephen Lukawski. He puts a lot of time into this, and even though I spin the records on the backside and we do the posting and stuff, Stephen really does a lot of the hard, heavy lifting. So I want to say thank you to Stephen Lukawski as well for another great KISC My Health Radio show. Stephen, take it away.
Thank you, Peter, and hello out there, live from Planet Cranberry. It's Captain Cranman, Steve Lukawski, bringing another great, fantastic, amazing interview to KISC My Health. Our listeners today are going to be inspired with this person that I'm going to introduce in a moment, but I want you all to go grab that favorite beverage of yours, and let's sit back and let's listen to this inspirational interview. It's because it's going to be June-tastic, because we're in the month of June, and I'm telling you, we've got over 100-plus interviews already done, leaders in the natural product industry who come on live, on air, and share their career journey and success story with all of us. Now, I want to just remind you, this is not a show about making money. This is a show about giving time, giving back time, helping others and guiding people, giving them advice on how these leaders actually have been able to climb the ladder, both personally and professionally. Yes, they all have had challenges and setbacks. They've all faced adversity, and yes, they all have been able to climb that ladder, and they want to come on the air and share with us what they are doing and how they've done it, because they haven't done it alone. It takes a team effort. It takes a lot of people behind the scenes, and like Peter said, you know, I can't stand here and do this radio podcast without the support of Peter and his team. So I thank you very much, and I can't do this radio show without our sponsors from the past. And we've had some great sponsors, from Pure Organic Sweeteners to Joe Bradley and RFI Ingredients, Heather Weiner and the Charlie's Angels team over there at Whole Foods Magazine. They've been with us every step of the way. And we have a passion of education, teaching others how they can make a difference by listening to these transformational, legendary icon leaders in the natural product industry. Now, remember, this show is about people. It's not about corporations. It's not about selling ingredients. It's about the people behind the scenes and giving them the spotlight that they deserve. Because without them, I wouldn't be here. I'm telling you the truth. I would not be here. Everybody that's been on this radio show has touched my career and have been an important part of my life. And I'm a better person for knowing all of them. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our next Cranmazing superstar champion legend, Blake Ebersole. Welcome to the show, Blake.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Great to be here with you. And there's no place where I can go and bring in together some things like my upbringing and where I came from and what I can do to help all the others who come after us.
Thank you, Blake. And I know this is a special show because once I tell you a little bit of background of Blake and what he's accomplished and what he's done, you'll have a better understanding why I've asked him to come on this show and say inspirational life lesson messages to our listeners, because he's been inspired by people like Michael McGuffin, who's no longer here, and who is the executive director of the American Health Products Association. And of course, we've had James Gormley, leading the way, passing the torch on to me to make sure that we get as many natural product leaders on air to be able to share their journey, because we just don't know when their time has come. And, I want to know more about people while they're alive, not when they're gone. Right? And that's why we do this show. It's like in remembrance of people while they're still in their best years yet to come. All right, so this is a beautiful opportunity for our listeners, to be able to sit back and be inspired. So let's continue on here. Now, Blake, nobody really, I'll be honest with you, I don't know how many people know of you, so I'm just going to say a little bit here that, Blake's a scientist, he's a supplement consultant, and he's industry insider who has spent his career, 20-plus years, behind the curtain of the natural product industry. As founder of NaturPro Scientific, he helps the supplement industry navigate product development, regulatory compliance, and quality assurance, helping early-stage startups to major multinational companies. Blake's new ventures focus on improving trust, transparency, and quality in the supplement supply chain, including Fearless Naturals, a curated ingredient club, the Ashwagandha Standards Alliance, focus on myth versus fact on ashwagandha, and Botanical Quality Group, which seeks to educate botanical buyers on the economics and prices behind their ingredients, whether the prices are too good to be true. He is privy to a lot of little secrets behind the supplement industry, and this is what we're going to talk about today. And he works to bring more clarity, accountability, and common sense to the industry. And that is a little bit of a background of Blake Ebersole. So, Blake, before we begin, all right, we're going to go to our first commercial break, then we're going to do a deep dive in what you have done, all right, and your life story right from the beginning of your childhood. Take it away, Peter.
Excellent. So I'm going to do this a little surprise for Stephen because he's launching Planet Cranberry. So here we go.
You've been listening to the KISC My Health Radio Show on Building Fortunes Radio and the Humongous Radio Network. This KISC My Health Radio Show is also available on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio, as well as dozens of other platforms connected to the Internet. If you are interested in the world's best cranberry product line, you will want to get your ingredients from Captain Cranman himself, Stephen Lukawski, from Planet Cranberry on planetcranberry.com. The website will be online before the end of the summer in 2026. Start your ordering and your inquiring about Planet Cranberry now by contacting Stephen on LinkedIn or by phone or text. The King of Cranberries, Stephen Lukawski, has always been your best source of products and information. So now it's time to get your ingredients from Planet Cranberry directly. With Planet Cranberry and Stephen Lukawski, you can make your world a better place and help others do the same. Now, back to our KISC My Health radio show. Take it away, Peter.
Yay, Stephen Lukawski, Planet Cranberry. We're going to be back talking more about that stuff on other radio shows.
That's live from Planet Cranberry. I'm telling you.
Live from Planet Cranberry.
Yeah, this is, that, again, for our listeners out there, Planet Cranberry is going to be all about cranberry. It's going to be finished retail products, not ingredients, but just retail products that you can purchase online. And you'll have the whole story behind the products and directly from the grower, the processor, the supplier. You will have traceability, transparency. You're going to have everything that you want to know before you spend your hard-earned money on buying your next cranberry product. So that being said, I am fearlessly excited about our guest today, all right, Blake Ebersole, all right, who's starting up a new adventure called Fearless Naturals. I'd like to touch base on this just from the beginning here, Blake, and then we're going to jump into your childhood and family background, okay? So tell me about this Fearless Factors, what it's all about.
Yeah, thanks for asking, Stephen. And, as a quality guy, I've been in the technical side of things and I've been on the supply chain end. And, one of the questions and one of the complaints everybody always has is like, why are poor quality ingredients always being used? And so, we talk about it, we write articles about it, but I thought, what if we put together a curated set of the best quality ingredients all in one place so that buyers can get educated, they know what's high quality, and they can make the buying decision from there. And as we all know from the supply end, it's hard for buyers to really understand the quality, like the email chains and the back and forth, and the kind of the hiding, when nobody knows what's going on, and you got to ask for certain things before you get them. I said, let's cut through the bullshit. Let's try to break down the silos. Let's put everything out there in one place, and all the best ingredients, top selling, most popular ingredients. So we got the best source of cranberry. We got the best source of creatine. We got the best source of collagen. So we're about ready to launch, and we've been working on this for the past year. And it's going to be really exciting to see how it turns out. And so I can't wait to share more about that in the near future.
I look at your what you're trying to do as sort of a protector, a guardian, someone who wants to shield away the bad actors and reward the good companies out there. They're doing the right thing, and always putting quality ahead of of people. And in the sense of it's easy to say, all right, we want to save money, but look, the consumer comes first. Right? At the end of the day, it has to deliver efficacy. It can't be sugar-coated. We have to. Each day I'm out there in the cranberry world debunking the junk, right, of cranberry, because I know, all right, there's a lot of adulteration. That's why I've been so supportive of American Botanical Council out there, and Mark Blumenthal, Stephen Gafter, and the group over there, and because we have to guard and police and protect the consumer. Now the consumer thinks we're already doing a good job, but I'm just letting the consumer know, all right, we can do a better job out there. All right, and sometimes the bad actors are winning, especially now with the cost of of everything being so expensive. People are trying to find ways to save money, and starting at low priced products is not the answer, because we know the dark side of it.
Yeah, and the back end, those of us who really know the secrets need to talk about them so that everybody gets educated, from the brands and the manufacturers all the way down to the consumer. And so that's why I'm here today. Partially to talk about, hey, here's some secrets, and you've seen me on Subco and Price Plow recently. Our work with ashwagandha is very well aligned with this, and so at this point in my career, I'm opening it up, and I'm sharing the dirt on it, and then also showing people really what do they need to go to ask about. It's really all about education, because people just don't know. And so, when we educate people, then everybody can make their own decisions. And right now, there's a lot hidden. And so that's what I feel is, part of my job here.
Yeah, but I also wanted to, mention to all those companies that are doing the right things, doing the testing, and using third-party certified labs, intentionally doing what's needed, all right, to make a difference in this world. Thank you so much for those companies out there, right? And but for the ones that want to play that, catch me if you can game, all right, buyer beware. We're here to help protect you, and we're here to help you understand through education what to look for. So I'm going to ask, going back to your childhood, were you sort of the guy in the classroom looking to save the rest of the kids out there, looking to protect people? All right, because you seem to have that mission right now with your new adventure.
Yeah, so I think there's a deep backstory here, and first of all, I grew up in a place that nobody knows how to place on a map, and it's called Edders, Pennsylvania, and Edders is actually a post office, and so nobody really knows how to get there or where it is. But what's really most interesting about this place is that by the crow flies, we were 3 miles away from 3 Mile Island. And so I was 6 months old, or 18 months old, when the near meltdown happened. And so growing up, in my community, there was a major distrust of power and government, and everybody involved with who put a nuclear power plant 3 miles away from our house. And so that kind of started in me, kind of an ingrained sense of like, hey, we got to do things that are right. And growing up with parents, my heritage is Pennsylvania Dutch Mennonite from my dad's side, and my mom's side is New York Italian. We're independent. We speak our mind and we try to do the right thing. And so, we're growing up, it was all about, hey, what's the truth behind what we're looking at here, and we're not trying to bullshit. And I really grew up with that mentality of like, hey, let's try to do the right thing. Let's understand what we're talking about, and let's make sure that we don't let power abuse itself.
Yeah, money, power, greed, all those, the fear, those they come into play. Everybody needs you until they have the money and they have the, it just changes things, right? And we've seen that in our industry, and over the years, do you think the industry's better today when you're talking like this, or do you think that we have a long way to go?
Yeah, natural products have always been this kind of Pandora's box. We're not regulated like drugs, and we're not as big as foods, and so it's a lot of opportunists who want to just make money. And so you say, okay, well, how do we do the right thing in natural products and supplements when we're dealing with so much different uncertainty? A plant can grow in a field and be different from a plant growing in the field down the road. And so how do we control things? And so luckily we have science. We've had, so much good science, in the past 50 years. And we know what the right thing to do is now. Now we have to convince people of doing the right thing. And so here we are with 200,000 supplement products in the U.S. and so many suppliers, and relative Wild West when it comes to FDA regulations and enforcement. Well, it's like, well, who's going to stand up and do the right thing? Who's going to speak our mind? Who's going to stand up for the best quality ingredients and not just be out for a quick buck? Well, I'm going to be part of that movement, and not the other side.
All right. So again, we're going to switch right back to childhood, family, brothers, sisters, mom and dad. Are they still around? Little background of that.
Yeah, I'm lucky to have my parents still around, but growing up, I grew up in the country, and we didn't have a lot of toys. My dad grew up Mennonite, so he didn't have toys. So I didn't have video games, and we didn't have a lot of neighbors, and so I had books. And so I was a big reader. I had my mom. My mom was my best friend growing up, and so we did things together, and then. But my sister wasn't born until I was 8 years old, so I was kind of an only child growing up, and so it was, really just being outside and going in the creek with the dog and riding my bike and all that stuff. And so yeah, it was one of those things where I was kind of an introvert. I was a big reader. Grew up in the country, not really exposed to stuff. We had 13 buttons on our TV, and only 6 of them worked. And so
forget the
my favorite thing was going out and throwing rocks at the mailbox. Like that was my favorite thing, and that led to my love of baseball. So,
but you were Mennonite. You had power. So.
Yeah, but my dad left. My dad never got baptized, and so he refused to go to church because the minister took away his TV that he worked for all summer, and so yeah, we were definitely not Mennonite, but the same kind of ideals of independence and independent thinking. That was kind of where I grew up from.
I like that. I like that independent thinking, and it's for me. It's my family. It was church was always the foundation. It was the rock. It was our savior. To be able to go out there every day and just know that we've been blessed with a roof over our head and clothes on our back and food on the table, and because we could never have done that on our own. We've always been blessed, and but it took hard work and effort and sacrifice by all of our parents at those years and that time. Throwing rocks at mailboxes, or windows. Right?
No, I was scared of throwing them anywhere near the house, and so yeah, like my mom said, yeah, you break something, you're going to be in trouble, and so yeah, there's that type of, a little bit of fear, but still like, hey, I wasn't about to disappoint my parents there,
Yeah, we had old houses in the fields where we were growing up, and 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 the kids would all want to come out and play and just go to those houses, and like we called them haunted houses back then, and we would and mischievous little things that we would do. Right? It was just because we were obviously we were having fun playing, and we were bored, and we did things. So, even digging holes in the ground and tunnels, and
yeah.
But I miss all that, to be honest with you. All right,
I remember, fishing with a net in the creek and thinking, hey, this is against the rules. We need to be fishing with the line, and we were looking around like, is anybody watching and see if we're catching these fish with the net?
Yeah. So, these fishing stories, they only get better in life, and because we're always fishing for success, and and trying to find ways to. I always wanted to make my mom and dad proud of me, and it's like it's just sort of. I want to make them proud, right? That I was out there doing the best I can because they gave me life, and I was so thankful for that. And we were middle class, family, and trying to stay middle class, and because in Canada is like there's really middle class is just being squeezed right out, and they're rich or you're poor now, depending on your definition of poor. But I've always said we've been rich in the family of love and happiness and joy. With growing up with brother and a sister, and so we always looked for the good, never focused on what we didn't have. We focused on what we did. And I think I just sort of like Blake, like yourself, we look for the good in people, right? We look for the good in everything, and we try to make this world a better place.
That's right.
And that's why I love what you're doing right now. So. Okay, so let's move up here. You're in your child. Give me one of your favorite childhood memories besides throwing rocks at mailboxes.
Well, growing up, I played sports, and so I was, played soccer, and then baseball, and then got into wrestling and football later on, and so being on a team with a bunch of guys where we're all having fun, we're all shooting for the end goal, we're all trying to make ourselves better, we're telling jokes and playing pranks, like that was the best thing, because growing up I didn't have a lot of people my age around me, and so sports is really where I found this kind of team effort. But I started working when I was 13 years old, and so my dad was general manager of Country Club of Harrisburg, and so that became kind of where I learned about life. So I've been paying into Social Security for 35 years, and working in banquets and working with kind of the salt of the world. My staff member colleagues, and then having to deal with country club members and being able to serve dignitaries and the Pennsylvania governor and all this stuff. It's like, that's really where my world sense and my understanding of the world was formed.
Mm-hmm. But also, that servant leadership style that you possess, that giving heart, you sort of look at your that time period in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, contributing towards that.
Yeah, for sure. And like, my dad always said, well, your paycheck is your report card for work already done, right? And so you say, okay, you show up every day, you do your best, you try to figure out the right thing to do, and then maybe your paycheck will come, and then maybe eventually you get a pay raise, but you got to do the work first. And then you got to serve people. We were in banquets. We were white glove service, serving from the left, picking up from the right, always picking up the water glass, always polishing the silverware. And so it was like, there's the right way to do things, right? When we're plating it up, we're not just slopping it on the plate. We're wiping off the edges. We're if we got it in the house, we're going to give it to them if they want it. This kind of service was kind of ingrained in me from an early stage, where customer service, people want something, you got to try to give it to them, and you got to work to make it happen.
Well, what kind of value system did your parents teach you during your watching them as you grew up?
Yeah, they were so integral to who I am today, and yeah, it was always, well, so my mom became a nurse. My dad was a restaurant manager, so we'd sit around at the dinner table. So my dad would make, something, delicious with obviously with a lot of cream or fat and, lobster thermidor. And then my mom would be like, well, yeah, but, this thing has, 20 grams of saturated fat in it. And so, we'd always sit around and be honest and critique, the service, the occasion that we would go out to a restaurant, we'd sit there and talk about the food and the service. And so it's like, this kind of honesty and really being, but also being kind to people, like, hey, yeah, they're a little bit understaffed right now, so we gotta be, we can't be too critical. And so, yeah, growing up in this restaurant environment, growing up in the service environment, it really made you understand, so many things, the people, the quality, the food, all the aspects. And, even though I didn't end up in food service, like that's still, a big lesson that I came away with.
Did you end up in the kitchen learning how to cook?
Yeah, well, so, I was in the gig economy, before that was a thing. And so, I worked for my dad, and then I worked for his friend, the country club down the road, and I did catering and then I started my own business. And so it's like, I started a business doing driveway sealing. And so I would go out there and, mix these drums up of tar on the back of my truck with a spade shovel and put down the tar during the day. And then I'd have to go to the club at night and put on a tux uniform. So I'd be there scrubbing the tar off my fingers with gasoline so that I could serve people without looking back.
Hey, Blake, I'm gonna have to call you. Everybody calls me Cran Man. I'm gonna have to call you Pays Man.
That's right. Yeah. No. So that was my first business when I was 18. I had Paragon Resurfacing Enterprises, and I had a Ford F-150 with 255-gallon drums on the back, and I was enterprising. I think I got busted for putting flyers on people's mailboxes, without mailing them. That was a federal offense. I sent an email through the college email system. Well, it turns out that was wrong, but I got the bursar of the university to hire me for a job, and so yeah, it was I was like, hey, I loved independence. And my dad wasn't going to give me money for gas money or whatever, and so I was like, hey, I gotta make some money here,
All right. Well, let's look at your education then. How did look at your university, college background. Who paid for what? Was this all based on asphalt savings?
Yeah. So, in high school, I was a decent student. I probably didn't study the most, but I always loved chemistry. And so I had great chemistry teachers, Mrs. Becker and Mr. Gallagher. And so it was like, this is the essence of the world is chemistry. And so that's what I really loved. But then at the same time, I was watching crime shows like Murder, She Wrote and Law and Order, and I was like, yeah, I want to be an FBI agent. I want to be in the crime lab, right? And so when I went to college, I was like, well, I want to study chemistry, but I also want to be kind of, on the side of justice. And so, I went to Westchester University, which was close by, and they were one of the few with a forensic chemistry program. And so, that's where I ended up. And so like, But then I got into the lab and I was like, I don't like this. I don't like following these directions. I don't like, following these procedures that I already know what the purpose of it is. Like, I want to discover new things. And so I ended up skipping a lot of the labs to go to Baldwin's Book Barn or whatever, because I was like, come on now, like I'll get a B in this class, and at the same time I was working. I was going home and working nights and weekends, and so it was like, I guess I wasn't as good of a student in college as I should have been. But yeah, everything you look back, you're like, hey, it was a bad decision at the time to skip class and go to the bookstore. But at the same time, I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, but then you moved on to Butler University and got your master's of business administration. You want to talk about that?
That's right. Yeah, well, so, I started working in the industry, and I said, well, I kind of understand business, but, I'm more of a scientist, and still early career, and we said, hey, we got Butler, a few minutes away from our house. My wife, who's supported me the whole way, we went together, and so we both did the night school at Butler for our MBA, and it really helped me to really understand it. So I had the choice in business school to pick finance or marketing or I forget what the other focus was, and I've always been interested in marketing because it's like, how do you convince people what the truth is and persuade them to make the right decision, right? So that's why I got into marketing, because it's like, wow, there's the awareness curve where you're like, hey, you gotta get from introduction to education, and maybe you'll get to awareness, and then finally you'll get to persuasion and call to action. Like, oh yeah, now that put into context really what the world was all about.
Yeah, what we call So I look at marketing completely different than sales, but I think that you found. Did the natural product industry find you, or did you find the natural product industry?
I stumbled into it, but I always was interested in it. Like when I was in 7th grade, I was walking to the high school to do a wrestling practice, and I walked past GNC, and in their window they had a big poster for Rip Fuel, and I was like, yeah, I'm not as strong as these other guys in high school. I want to be ripped. And so, I started taking Rip Fuel, which, at the time it was, I think, 3 capsules and maybe, I don't know how much milligrams of ephedrine. But I was like, yeah, this supplement stuff, wow, this is powerful. And, obviously being 7th grade, you don't know anything. But yeah, so that was my start in supplements. And then, so when I saw the ad on Monster in 2004 or whatever for an herbal company, I'm like, wow, this really has the power to not only help people and make them feel good, but I always thought there was a kind of magic to a farmer growing something that helps the health of a consumer around the world, and both parties benefit. And so if we can support the farmer, and then we can also support the consumer, well, that's a win-win, right? And so something about herbs always, something about natural products always vibe with me. And then, growing up in food and growing up, my mom's a nurse, like it all just kind of came together there.
Yeah. Well, in 2012, you started with the American Herbal Products Association, which is a great organization for anybody out there looking to, join. So you want to tell us a little bit about how you ended up finding the association to join, why you joined them?
Yeah, the company I was working for at the time, I was technical director, and so I was going to India and trying to make sure that everything was GMP, and went through the whole NSF certified process there, and then they were sending me to giant companies to try to sell in our ingredients from there. And so then they said, hey, why don't you go to the APA meetings, and that's where I found my group, and people of like-minded who are trying to do the right things, who are creating standards, or educating people. I was like, wow, this is a really great model, and I really looked up to Michael McGuffin, who just created APA, from very small means, and you say, hey, we can create standards for what people consider, herbal products, it's this crazy thing, well, these plants, there are standards, there is science behind it, there is education, and so that's why I got involved to try to help and support that initiative.
Well, I'm so glad you got involved. What like Michael McGuffin, God bless him, I know he's watching over us today, he's probably listening to this interview right now. What would you say to Michael if he was here today?
Probably thank you, and that we'll keep tending to your garden. And so Graham Rigby, who took over at APA, has done a wonderful job of continuing that legacy. APA is stronger than it's ever been. Membership is strong. The initiatives are strong. They're responding to, a lot of these things that we see that are, that need response, whether it be ashwagandha or tariffs or, regulations, like, hey, somebody's got to stick up for the right thing, and that's where APA comes in, and so that's why I continue to participate. I'm in on many of the committees and the meetings, and you feel a really sense of like, hey, we're all here trying to do the right thing. Nobody's trying to get an advantage in business who's part of APA, and it's totally collaborative, which is a little bit different than how we see much of the industry.
Well, tell me a little bit more about your experience at American Herbal Products Association and how it made you as a better business person.
Yeah, being a part of APA was kind of priceless for me because, most people, you work for your own company and you have the people around you that you work with, and, you don't necessarily learn as much from your own company as you might by working with people from other different companies, and being on the committees and listening and learning from other people and how they deal with questions and problems, and especially having people who have been around longer than me and have more education and knowledge, like learning from them. So like, I always take every opportunity as an opportunity to learn whoever I'm with. And even if it's like, my son who's 11 years old, well, what am I learning from him? Same thing with APA. And you're in the committee meeting, you got different people, bringing up different questions, and everybody's working towards a common goal. And that's why I love being part of it.
Yeah, it's one of the better associations, I think, out there that brings the value, every day. And so I truly admire the hard work and effort that Michael McGuffin and the team is doing over there. And thank you so much, Blake, for your contribution to their association over those years. So, but during that time, you started a company. You want to talk about that? NaturPro Scientific?
That's right. So after about 10 years of, working in supplements, I said, well, how do I grow? How do I challenge myself? And, I actually came into a big opportunity, a great opportunity at the time in cannabis, where I was like, well, hey, this is an interesting industry and they need standards. And so, my first job consulting was with a casino owner in Vegas for creating the best products there. But very quickly I realized, hey, I need to branch out. I need to push myself. I need to understand all the different parts. Previously I was just on supply chain, and I kind of got a sense from working with the brands, but so over the past 11 years, I've learned so much, and I've been able to push myself and help people. I've worked with close to 300 different clients, from tiny startup to Bayer Healthcare, and it's like I almost feel like Forrest Gump a little bit. Like I've been able to help so many people. I've testified as expert witness against Dr. Oz, on some of his, silly stuff that he said. I've been able to stand up for the right thing, and I wouldn't reverse any of the decisions or the moves that I've made, even though at the time it felt uncomfortable. I questioned myself. Can I do this? Should I do this? Every time you're in that situation, you should always think, hey, as long as I can do it, then I will do it. And just because you didn't do it before doesn't mean that you can't learn how to do it. And so I always try to become, be super prepared into anything I come into, because oftentimes I always have questions like, what's going on here, and do I know enough? And then so I ended up hiring other experts. I hired expert natural product formulators, and I hired expert chemists who taught me, the right way to do things. And then I was able to incorporate those processes into NaturPro. And so, at this point, I have a giant service list on my website, and people are like, wow, you do all this stuff? I'm like, well, yeah, whether I can do it myself or whether I have, my team of experts and friends, subject matter experts, we're here to deliver the best product. Just like back in the country club days, the best service there. We're trying to really do right by our clients.
Yeah. What challenges, struggles did you have to overcome that you want to talk about during that time period when, as an entrepreneur with NaturPro Scientific?
Yeah, and being a technical guy, a quality guy, regulatory guy, a lot of the right thing to do runs against the incentive for people to make money or to make a quick buck or to, develop the next best thing. And so, obviously, almost every conversation I enter into could be, potentially adversarial, where I'm telling people something they don't want to hear, right? And so, I've been able to kind of have a keen sense of, okay, is who I'm talking to, do they really want to understand the right thing to do, or are they just trying to get somebody to sign off on something that's not right? And so yeah, it's a matter of we're not right for everyone. I'm not right for everyone, but the people we are right for, they stick by us. They give us repeat referrals. They tell all their friends. And so yeah, I don't work for many people that are out for a quick buck. But yeah, that's how it is. The pie is big enough for everyone. I'm going to focus on the slice of the pie that I know that I can do the best on, and I'm not going to sacrifice, my instincts or my values. We're one of the few people that don't double dip, which is, taking a cut on the vendor, while you're working for the client. And as I understand, that's relatively rare. And so I always said, if you're working for the client, how do you know, how can you possibly also be taking a cut from the vendor? Because it's a conflict of interest. It sacrifices your integrity and your judgment. And so I always said that right when I started. I said, I'm never going to do that. And still to this day, that's one of our values.
Yeah, no, I look at it this way. You're hired as a consultant, and a consultant, what's the definition of a consultant today? You're born to be fired, I would think, at times as a consultant, because they're going to squeeze you, go around you eventually. They have nothing, you help them, and then the next thing you know, they want to take your book of business away and go directly. So when you go into that space as a consultant, right, you know that, if you don't have skin in the game, you're going to be gone, because that's just the way I think our industry has been, and because money changes everything, as you know. What did you learn about people themselves when working, and, because you had to collect the paycheck from those companies, right? You had to chase them down. What did you end up learning about those people?
Yeah, and just like working at the club or, anything in life, there's a few bad apples, but most people are good. And even now the people that are good, there's still the self-interest involved. And so if you don't give them value, if you don't give them what they want, if you're overcharging or nickel and diming, that's not going to work. I want people to come back for me to me next time, and they do. And so, luckily I've learned, I didn't grow up street smart at all. Luckily I've learned more about people and how the world works, as a teenager. And so, yeah, I've gotten to have a good sense of when I talk to somebody, are their interests aligned with mine? If they're not, then that's fine. Maybe I'll help you, but you're not gonna be my number one client, and move on. There was a period after college where I did door-to-door sales and for 2 weeks, and it wasn't very fun, but the idea was you get to the no's in the morning, get to all the people that say no in the morning, and then in the afternoon you can find the people that might say yes, and so you say, hey, not everybody's going to be a good fit, but the people who are a good fit, we're going to do the best for them, and that's kind of how I approach it.
Yeah, we're in a relationship business, and there's no question about that. People do business with people because, one, they like them, and then you earn your trust from there. So our listening audience, and include some early, people who just started in the natural product industry, or maybe they're starting out in a new job. What advice can you give to the younger generations out there on, you talk about marketing, about personal branding and getting known and how to be visible out there?
Yeah, I think, you just gotta work as hard as you can and learn as much as you can, and don't feel like you're entitled to anything in this world. Like nobody is granted anything. You have to work for it. You have to show your value. You have to sometimes get out of your comfort zone to, you might know enough about something, but don't feel comfortable being an expert. Well, spend that night learning about it. Now we got Google, we got AI. You can become an expert, or at least enough of an expert in things to be the lead on the team. If you know more on your team or in your group than anybody else, well, you're that person, right? And so don't be afraid of being that person. I see a lot of young people who, whether out of insecurity, and I had the same issues when I was younger, but do the work. You gotta stick your neck out and make yourself valuable, or else your boss is going to be like, hey, do we really need this person? And so, how to create your value, how to create your personal brand, that's part of it. Whether it's, you don't have to post on LinkedIn like I do. I didn't start doing that till later in my career when I wasn't so afraid of repercussions, but yeah, even internally, like being that leader, being that person who's willing to ask the hard questions, not being the yes man to everything, not just being, not just going along with what the boss says. That's how people know that you're reliable. So yeah, it's more about thinking long term about, who you want to be versus, okay, do I save face in this particular meeting?
Yeah, I think you're right. Self-confidence is so important. You got to wake up each morning, look in that mirror, and realize that you're a gift, you're valued, all right? You're going to make a difference in this world. You have to think that that's what you have been given. It's called life, right? And you now want to go out there and you want to showcase your talents. Now, you're right. Not everyone is going to value you, all right, the same way. And you need to find, you should need to step out of the comfort zone, like you just said, to be recognized and to learn and grow, right? But I want people to know this is very important. When you are working in a company, make sure the culture that you're working is aligned with your vision of what you are looking for in a company. Because culture is so important. If you're looking for working for a boss, you just told everybody, during this interview, you don't like direction, right? And you never did when you were younger, right? You didn't like taking direction. So you went to
yeah.
You went to books. Like if someone's going to treat you like a dollar sign, all right, and you don't feel like you want to be treated as a dollar sign, and they're micromanaging you. Right, and I have to ask yourself: do I go to the book club like Blake did and just read books? All right, or do I sit there and just collect a paycheck? Right, and
right.
how important?
It's a balance too, because you could be working in a situation where you are getting something out of it, but the boss sucks, or you have a lot of failures and you're with B players and things like that, and you say, okay, well, get the most out of your time there, and then look to move on, because I was never cut out for corporate, because I know those the stories and how that works, and it just wasn't for me. But for some people, that security, that kind of process, or whatever it is, that works for you. And so, you don't want to just necessarily say, one is bad and the other is good. But think about who you are and what you want to do and where you want to be. Bide your time. If you're suffering right now, well, get the most out of it.
Yeah, okay, so let's go back again to a guidance and advice you're going to give younger people, all right, in the natural product industry, all right? So, get out of the comfort zone you had mentioned. What about being authentic, being your true self? How important is that?
That's right. Well, and that's important too. Obviously there's this kind of personal versus work balance where you're always thinking about, okay, how is this going to impact my job and my security long term? And so, I'm in a lucky position where I don't have to report to anyone. I'm the boss. I don't have a big staff of people, and so that's allowed me certain advantages to be able to say what I say on LinkedIn or whatever. And so, you always have to think, earlier in my career, I wouldn't have been saying the things that I do now on LinkedIn. And so authenticity is one of those things where you say, hey, what is the purpose of what I'm doing? Is it important? Who am I going to piss off? At this point, I do still weigh those things, even when I'm saying things that I know pisses people off, and I know that, but I say it in the sense of I'm doing the right thing, and nobody else is saying it, and somebody needs to say it. And so yeah, you do want to balance those things, but you still want to figure out how do you maintain this authenticity and stand up for the right things when you need to. And that doesn't mean being a constant complainer or whatever, but when the rubber hits the road and it's the time to stand up for the right thing, you want to still be there to be able to do that.
Yeah. I always look at it, for every action, there's a consequence.
Yeah.
Right? And you got to think twice before you open your mouth. All right? If you don't like something that someone has said, count to 10. Hold back. Don't say anything. Gather your emotions, because don't let other people control your emotions. You're right. What you learn at university is one thing. The street smarts is another. Right? And the university does not teach us that. And you've got to put on a tough coat in the business world, because all they will say is, that's business. That's business. And we see it already. Contracts. What goes a contract today? Right? It's like at the end of the day, we'll just change the terms of the contract after you sign the contract. We've seen that. We've seen that with politicians today. That's
right. Some people go the other way so much where they're too timid to say something, and then it didn't have any benefit ultimately anyway. And so it is about finding that balance of sticking up for yourself, sticking up for the right thing. And then, listening to other people, because, sometimes I think I have a strong opinion, right? But then somebody else says something that kind of weakens my opinion. And so having that open-mindedness is so important, because, if you have two strong opinions and you're not open-minded and willing to learn, well, that's a dangerous combination there.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. You always need to be a student of learning and always be open-minded. All right, be curious, be ambitious. Like I said, step out of your comfort zone, because that's the only way you're going to learn. Right, and in the business world, that's a whole different landscape. So I'm not even going to talk about that. All right, because in the business world, you better have an iron stomach, because there are people that don't respect you, because all they see is they want to see you as a return on investment. They don't care what goes on in your personal life. They don't ask questions. How are you today? Is there anything I could do to help you? Oh, they say, what did you do for me? What have you done? Where are the sales? Right? I see that. I hear it all the time, from people out there, that complain to me about, the company I'm working with says this and says that. If you are an ingredient seller out there, please note what Joe Bradley always said: selling a science-based ingredient is the most difficult thing to do. Most difficult thing. Right? Because people think, just because I have science on an ingredient, it'll sell by itself. Well, that's not the case. Right? So we've seen, right, Blake?
Yeah, for sure. And I always talk about, Porter's 5 Forces stuff and SWOT. Your strengths and weaknesses are one thing, but the externalities, the things you can't control, you have no control over. And so we can't control how competitive it is. We can't control the regulations. We can't control the economy. But all these things are factors in our success, right? And so all you can do is focus on the things that you can control, and then acknowledge them. If your boss thinks, hey, you're not doing enough, or you're not selling enough, say, hey, let's be realistic here. Look at what we're playing with. Have we done enough? Have we dug in enough on our competitive, assessments and all this stuff? I deal with, on the sales side is like, hey, we're not selling enough. Well, maybe our product isn't good enough. So you got, the 4 Ps here. Promotion is only one part. The product has to be good. Everything else has to be right. The positioning. So yeah, having those discussions with a manager who thinks, well, you're not doing enough. Well, let's talk objectively and go back to the 4 Ps and the Porter's 5 forces and the SWOT analysis, and then now let's be objective about it.
Yeah. The challenge really is that if somebody puts all their money into a science and then they have all these clinical studies on that ingredient, they expect it to sell by themselves. They don't put money into the marketing side, that push-pull. Right? And I've seen that. I've seen great products, great science never get to the consumer, never, because they don't have the money to market and get it onto the shelves. Right? And I always remember a customer in the past said, Stephen, if you want us to buy your cranberry, force us to buy it. Force us. Right? Show us why we need to buy it. Right? I'm thinking, wow, he's right. And a lot of companies don't want to be the first one out there. Right? They want to be the followers. They want to be, oh, wow, that company has it? Well, I better have it then.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, being a me too. Well, it's not the 1 P or the 2 Ps. It's the 4 Ps. This is business school stuff. Promotion has to come with the product, right? Because if a tree falls in the forest, nobody's there to see it. And, here we are. We're in the current age, which means, the people can't just hear about it 2 or 3 times. They have to hear about it 8 or 10 times until it sticks in their head.
Yeah.
Right? And so, that costs money. That costs promotion dollars. Whatever it is, figure it out. HubSpot, Nutrient, sponsored ads, you got to stick in people's heads, or else you're there with 1,000 other ingredients, and you have the best product in the world that nobody's ever heard about.
Yeah, if our listeners out there, don't take rejection personally. Just because they're not calling back after you phone them 6 or 7 times, all right? Don't take that personally. They're busy. Right then, but one day they might call you back. Be resilient, be strong.
Yeah,
you're facing headwinds when you're selling ingredients out there. All right, it's not like people need you. All right, you got to show them value. You got to show them why they should be working with your company. Right, and what you offer, be a solution provider, be a problem solver. Don't be so darn transaction oriented.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, and the normal rule is don't expect a response, because the people you're sending to, they get 200 emails a day, and maybe you're just one of another 100 of suppliers, and so any response you get is just that's the best thing in the world, and don't expect it. But you and your communication might not be the fault of why you're not getting responses. Could be the product, which is not under your control. So that's a message for anybody that's selling. You got to be persistent, but don't think that you have control over the launch plan of your customers.
Yeah. And remember, it costs money to put a new product in the lineup.
Yeah.
Right? And I think somebody told me it's maybe over $100,000 at least to launch a new product.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Well, and half of that is marketing. So I have clients that come to me and here, help me develop my product. But then I ask, well, what's your marketing budget? Because you can't just create a product and expect people to suddenly beat down your door. The marketing side, and in this age, you got to do the Facebook ads or whatever it is. That is at least 50% of your budget, and so So yeah, like even though I'm not super involved on that marketing side, I know I've seen so many failures of great products, great people, great brands. Second mortgage. They're about to divorce their wife over it, and they got this dream, and they create the best product, but then they didn't plan for the financial costs of the marketing and the positioning and everything else, and it's a huge failure, and I feel so bad. I did my part, but you can always tell those people when you first talk to them that they have a lot to learn about how the industry works.
Yes, yeah, they have their own idea what they think how it works, but in the reality of it all, if they don't spend money, they're not going to make money, and they just can't rely on the Rolodex of names or contacts that we have, right? All right,
yeah.
That's part of it. All right.
And, in the U.S. in supplements, Porter's Five Forces, especially the competitive force, is the major killer because there's so much competition, both on the ingredient side and the finished product side. And you think, oh yeah, well our main competitors are the top selling brands. No, they're the 100 other brands also selling magnesium or whatever else. And you're swimming in a red ocean, as it were, right? Like, there's sharks, there's blood, there's a school of fish with 5,000 fish, and here you are, you're another little fish trying to swim with this school, in shark-infested waters. Yeah, like, and I lose a lot of business that way when I tell people on the first call, hey, this isn't going to be peaches and cream. You better get your act together and understand your product and your positioning before you think you're going to be making money on this.
Yeah. So I have a question for you then. What's your opinion on an ingredient company that lots of science on it, and they've got some customers already out there in the marketplace, right, with their brand on their product, right, and then they come out with selling direct to consumer with their own brand.
Yeah, I think it can work, but again, like being good at one part of the business doesn't mean you're automatically going to be good at another part of business. So so there's so many parts involved to any business where just because you control the supply doesn't mean you know how to market, doesn't mean you know the consumer, doesn't mean you know any of that stuff. And so you see, some companies are able to do both, like some ingredient suppliers are able to market directly to consumer, but the failure rate is very high, and you don't see them suddenly, not many are good ingredient suppliers and maintain that business and then at the same time become a great consumer marketer as well. And so, so many people think this business is easy, and it's hard enough just being a good supplier or a good brand. Imagine doing both, and you say, better margins. Well, no, there's 50 other things you got to be good at outside of having, this better margin because you control the supply.
Yeah, it's a whole different world, a whole different language. People don't realize that, if you're on Amazon or Walmart, that people pay to be there on site, on certain pages at the top. All right, that's paid advertising to be there.
Yeah.
So you have to be, I've seen a lot of companies, ingredient companies, fail when they try to go down that, let's build, let's sell our branded ingredient and then compete against our customers, through e-commerce.
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't work, at the end. They may win the battle, but they'll lose the war overall. And,
it might work 1% of the time, but until you understand the metrics of customer acquisition costs, return on ad spend, and then you keep up with the monthly changes in how ads are done, that's a whole world in itself, right? Like whatever worked last month isn't working now. Well, shit, now we're underwater on our ad spend versus our revenue.
Well, look at it as a marketing tactic, strategy of getting your brand name out there, forcing companies to buy your ingredient because your numbers are really good on Amazon. And it's
an additional strategy for an ingredient supplier to show that they have a brand, but for marketing purposes, but to think that that is going to be a big source of revenue for you quickly without a lot of pain and learning and failure, well, that's kind of a pipe dream.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. At the beginning of the show, we talked about Planet Cranberry, and that's not my wheelhouse. I've always said, and to our listeners out there, it's so important. If you want to succeed in life, both personally and professionally, find people smarter than you. Right? Learn to grow. All right? Everybody's got talents. We're good at one thing. Someone may be better at another. But find your orchestra of people in life and learn from them and play beautiful music together. So with that Planet Cranberry, that e-commerce store really is to be able to educate the consumer, all right, on a retail product, from the start of the field, right, to the manufacturer, to the consumer, and educate them. And so, Peter, take it away to our next commercial. When we get back, we're going to talk all about leadership qualities and what makes a great leader today.
Go. Perfect. Well, thank you, and here we go.
You've been listening to the KISC My Health Radio Show on Building Fortunes Radio and the Humongous Radio Network. If you are interested in the world's best AI receptionist and AI business building platform, you will want to get your AI receptionist from humongous.com. Go to the specials page on humongous.com. That's YOUMONGUS.com/specials. Explore how small business owners and major corporations are using Humongous AI receptionists to do everything from answering incoming calls to scheduling appointments and even answering customer service questions. Your AI receptionist can do everything from making sure you never miss a call to texting reminders and follow-ups and even upgrading and closing more sales. Your AI receptionists will help you increase your productivity in just about everything. KISC My Health Radio suggests you have to check them out on the specials page on humongous.com. That's YOUMONGUS.com/specials. You can make your world a better place and help others do the same with the AI receptionists at humongous.com. Now, back to our KISC My Health Radio show. Take it away, Peter.
We are back with Stephen Lukawski and Blake Ebersole. We are going to make sure that he has all his links in the description of our Building Fortunes radio show and our KISC My Health radio show segment. So, Stephen Lukawski, back to you.
Yes, Captain Cranman live here with Blake Ebersole. Welcome back to the show, everyone. And I'm with Blake, and we're talking about his fearless natural adventure. We're talking about mentorship, leadership. Let's continue on with what qualities do you think, Blake, make a great leader today in the world of the natural product industry?
That's great. Yeah, and this is such an important topic, Stephen. And when I think about my personal, upbringing, and I had to work for my dad for 9 or 10 years, starting at age 13, and so I always thought, I always watched him and his how he led that company and how he dealt with kind of a transient workforce and being relatable, being open, asking questions, using all your personal skills from analytical, problem solving and being relatable, but mainly it's judgment. You have to have good judgment, and obviously to have that, you have to have the facts and not just be naive or not just jump to conclusions. And so, I think that's what I've always tried to do, myself after my dad is try to take a lot of what he did and bring it to my clients as hey, let's use good judgment on things. Let's not jump to conclusions, but let's also speak up when we have to. I might be a little bit more loud and outgoing than my dad is, but that's what I've tried to do.
Okay, all right. So, all right, good judgment. That's what you're saying, right? That's one of the good qualities of a. Okay, so where does empathy, compassion, active listening all fall in?
Yeah, I mean, those are so integral, right? Because you could go into a situation, thinking everything or thinking that the other person did something on purpose or it's But then, with some questions and open-mindedness, you realize the real situation. And so, empathy, caring for others, like, you don't know where somebody else is dealing with, or where they came from, or what they know, or what they can do. And so, empathy is probably the number one, property of a leader these days. It's not the, commandership and the hard, leadership that we were used to. But, my dad always talked about Dwight Eisenhower as kind of the example of a leader, as, somebody who listens, somebody who has good judgment, somebody who's not on a power trip. And so, we find the best leaders these days are really high empathy. They're good learners. They're big readers. They're not just the talkers. And so, that's the type of leadership that I try to embody myself.
Yeah. I find that effective leadership out there is bringing out the best and the potential of others. All right, and coaching, inspiring them to tap into their inner self that they haven't yet discovered, or giving them the confidence that they need to blossom. Be able to, no different than the gardens out there. You have fertilizer. Provide that fertilizer so they can grow, and to be able to nurture it through passion, compassion, with watering it. And I've always thought that that everybody can contribute, right? And it's just a matter of finding that person that could fit in and working with other people, because there's some people out there that just don't work well in a team approach. There's some people out there that they spell the word team T-I-E-M, right? It's like, they have the word I in there, and I just don't understand that. And, so it's nobody. I think today, did you grow up in an atmosphere, in a childhood environment that everybody gets a trophy?
No, obviously, yeah, and I wasn't showered with compliments, unless I deserved it, and so I think that benefited me. But I think some kids these days they feel entitled to a participation trophy, and they don't feel the failure. They don't feel kind of the negative feelings of what happens when they don't try very hard or when they don't do well. And so yeah, it is a different world, I think, than when you and I grew up. But I think instilling the idea that things aren't fair, and people will help you if you're high integrity and you do your best. But if we can sense people that feel entitled or feel like they deserve something, and people will be less likely to help you if you act like that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Blake. You use the word integrity. How important is that word in everyday business world for us?
Well, I mean, for me, it's everything, because here I am, reviewing labels and making sure people are doing the right thing. But it extends to all the other departments too, and if people can't trust you, if people, if you overpromise and underdeliver, all those things, like if you don't feel reliable, then people aren't going to include you on projects or credit or any kind of thing. And so you have to stand up. You have to do your best. You have to come through for the team. You got to be, try to become a 5-tool player, even if you don't ever, even if you're never good at more than 2 or 3 tools, you got to try to be good at those 5 tools, and don't say, hey, that's not my job, right? It might not be your job to take out the trash, but hey, somebody's got to do it. So, stepping up and doing what maybe isn't in your job description, well, that's how you discover and expand, and that's how you become valuable and reliable, is to even step up when it's not technically your job.
Yeah, I think that of course leaders delegate and they don't micromanage, and they treat people as adults first, not workers, right? People first, right? And so we know if we're getting a paycheck, we know what we need to do, and we don't need to be told what to do. Not at our age, that's for sure. All right, and but I think though that the younger people out there, you're right, they have to prove themselves. But I think working in an environment of fear is not going to help them do that. Right? I think you have to nurture a lot of people, younger people today, and making them feel that they're needed and wanted, right, and that they're valued. Right? That's part of it, right? And that there's a different style of leadership today than there was 15 years ago. I would say maybe the leadership style has even changed over COVID. Like, how have you found the business world since COVID?
Yeah, for sure. Leaders have to be empathetic, and so do the staff and the newer folks too. Everybody has to be empathetic to each other. New staff has to understand that the leaders have a lot of other things that they're dealing with, and so the less little problems you bring to the leader that you can take care of yourself or figure it out, well, that's a huge accomplishment. And so COVID taught us to not have to rely on being here together all together in one place in order to be effective. And so whether that's on say as much as you want about Zoom and remote work and everything, many teams have figured it out how to be effective remotely, and so and from a leadership standpoint, like I might find somebody better that's across the country than I can hire right here too, and so that's always a consideration is find the best people who are self-motivated, who are going to show up, and all those things, and then you don't have to babysit them in an office that you're paying rent on and is taken away from your margins.
Yeah, no, I think communication is so important with leadership, and you can't be a mind reader out there, right? And you've got to be out there, expressing what is on your mind, and if you have a problem or concern, you have to feel comfortable in working in an environment where you're not threatened of being able to speak your mind. Right? And and I think that's a good leader will bring that out in you, and that it's a safe environment. If we have a problem, let's discuss it now. If you have a problem with somebody in the office, let's discuss it now. All right? You don't want it to manifest, and you want to nip it in the bud right away. Don't you think so?
Yeah, absolutely. And as a consultant, I get to work with lots of different teams and people, and I can get a sense pretty early on whether it's a good team by whether people are afraid to speak up. And so, the ones that are afraid to speak up and you don't get good feedback from, well, they're in for doom. Whereas, the ones you do talk to where people have different points of view and they're disagreeing a little bit, well, you're on a good track and you're on a good team there. And so, I see it in real time, and I can, that's actually one of my indicators of whether it's a good client is whether the people I'm talking to are willing to disagree with each other.
Yeah, I got a couple more questions, and because I know we're pressed for time here. So, mentorship. How much has mentorship been in your careers and your success of what you've achieved so far?
Well, I never was in a corporate environment, and I never had whatever we call a formal training program, and so I always was trying to just do my best at the job during the day, and so that's just how I figured things out and got good at it. But it didn't have to be that way. I could have had more support, and that would have helped me. I look at Supply Side Fresh, which is a great training program that for new people in our industry. I'm like, if I would have had that, well, it wouldn't have taken me 5 years to figure out which way is up. And so, but certainly learning by example from other people. Just because somebody isn't sitting there spending a lot of time from you, you can sit there and observe, what they talk about, how they react, what decisions they make. And so it's, being a mentee should be more of an active, thing versus passive where you expect to be taught. No, take every opportunity you can to learn from the people who are more experienced and better from you, even if they're not sitting there and taking one-on-one time with you.
Yeah, I think that mentorship is important for to ask somebody, what was your success? How did you achieve where you are today? Don't be afraid to ask somebody, because a North Star, a true North Star will always reach out and guide you and give you the light that you need to get through where you want to go. We're servant leaders. We're giving hearts. We're here to help you grow, both personally and professionally. So don't be afraid to ask someone for help. It's like
that's right. And not being, I'm not the type of person to ask for help, but also from somebody who's more experienced, like, I love it when people ask me for help, and I always give my time. I always give, and so, people like us, like most people are willing to give our time up to people who ask. You just have to, reach out and ask for it. And so, don't be afraid to ask out, even if somebody, somebody more experienced isn't reaching out to you. Take that time to reach out to them and ask questions, and whether it's just by email or whatever, having a quick conversation, you got to do it so that you can really learn. And I kind of wish I would have done that earlier in my career, because I was so independent, and I thought, well, I don't need anyone. Well, I could have benefited from doing that myself.
Well, that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you too. If you look back at your age, say, early, like just be, 18, 19 years of age, what would you say to yourself today?
I would say try not to do so much on your own, and try to lean on other people, and ask people for help. And I mean, I'm a quick study, and I'm a fast learner, and that's how I am. But I think I would have benefited more from trying to get help from others. And so I think it's one of those things. It depends on your personality, but always trying to ask other people, especially like, hey, what are your thoughts on X? Like, what do you think I should do? And I'm the type of person I want to give. I want to give people, but then I want to do it myself. And so, if I talk to my younger self, I would be like, hey, take more advantage and opportunity with people around you who know more of what you're doing than I do.
Yeah, Blake, remember, like, I've seen people say, oh, I work so hard. I don't understand why I can't get ahead. All right, what am I doing wrong? And then you look at the fact that, well, maybe in the first, you're traveling east looking for a sunset. You'll never find it that way. All right, you need to pivot and move over here. All right, and they don't ask for help. They'll never understand why they need to pivot, because pivoting is so important. Out there, and in personal, like, that means choosing friends, all right, in your social world, your spiritual world, your career. Learn that word pivot, all right? It's never too late to say no. It's never too late to turn back, all right? You have to learn to make that adjustment, and I think that's really important that you've mentioned that, earlier on. So, but Peter, is there any other questions you have? Because I know we're pressed for time here.
We're good for a little bit. I have a quickie question though. You had mentioned, Blake, something about your using that extra tool, that 5 tools. AI has become real big, and I'd like you to kind of talk. And I'm going to say this because I'm pushing a lot of new people, meaning college students, to listen to these shows, so they can learn about this industry and see if this industry is something that they want to do something with. So could you talk about AI and how it's starting to influence, either positive or negative, the industry and what you do?
That's right. That's a great question, Peter. Even for myself, I've been in this industry 20 years, and still I find use in AI. Like, I use it on a daily basis to either synthesize like the full picture versus just kind of my partial picture at the time, but also to kind of vet and make sure that I'm thinking the right things. So I use it for a lot of different things, but I don't ever consider the output to be final. And so I go through lines of questioning where I start with one small question and go to the next and go to the next and go to the next. And so you can't just ask it one question and expect that output to be well put. But to me, it's able to accelerate our personal knowledge and our personal understanding of things. You don't necessarily have to take a college class anymore. You don't necessarily just have to squirt around on Google or whatever. Like now you can really get really good and knowledgeable at things very quickly that wasn't capable before. Now, on the other hand, everybody else has the same tool, right? It's not just you that has this tool, and so you have to understand, well, you have to up your game because other people are upping their game as well. And so, I think it's going to be so important to use it, but also to understand its limitations and try not to misuse it. And so, I'm the type of person where I question myself, I question the world, and so, I'm as critical of the output that AI gives me as anyone, and I try to correct it. But a lot of people trust, too much into what they're told, whether it be from somebody else, especially when it comes to what to do. And ChatGPT is here to please you, and so. Just like any other expert or any other mentor you talk to, well, don't just take it as the final. Take it as part of the totality of everything that you do to make yourself better and to figure out the right answer. But don't have overconfidence in what it's telling you, and still you have to show up every day to do your best, and so don't think, oh yeah, now I can only work 2 hours when before I had to work 8 hours. Well, that's a dangerous shortcut as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And you're talking about AI from the research part. We just started working with a company where we're using AI for our following up and prospecting and education and stuff like that. And I'll share with you, the advances in it, there's companies that do it right and there's companies that do it wrong. We found a really good combination of stuff that's doing right. And for anybody that runs a company, you might want to take a look at that. But I'm very interested in the new company that you have and working with you guys to be able to help you build that brand as well. So, Stephen, this has been a really wonderful radio show.
Fearless Naturals. That's the name of that company.
And we'll make sure that we have this in the show notes as well for all those people listening in. But, Stephen, I just went out to dinner with my niece. She came down from New York, and they're both college students. One is a corporate lawyer. He's a gentleman who's going to school for law. He might be corporate lawyer. The other one is thinking about doing some education. And I'm looking at all of these types of things, and I'm like, where are you going to fit in? And I think you're probably going to fit in best with a small, growing, entrepreneurial company with a CEO or a business owner like Blake, who's kind of been around, knows what's going on streetwise, has got a lot of experience, but plenty of doors of opportunity and unlimited growth, literally unlimited growth, because the brands you guys are building between Planet Cranberry and the Fearless brands and all that sort of stuff, I look at the future is really very bright for all these college students that are worried about being replaced by AI. There's wonderful opportunities right now working with Planet Cranberry or Fearless to be able to get this stuff off the ground. So anyway, back to you. And Blake, thanks for being here. We'll make sure we keep in touch as well. Stephen, back to you.
Yeah, Blake, any last word that you would like to say to our listeners?
Yeah, and speaking of AI, we're on the cusp of a new world, right? When it comes to work and life and everything, and it's to me, I'm still trying to wrap my hands around it and try to understand what that is. But I know, from the development of Fearless, last year it would have taken me $500,000 to develop it. Well, now with AI, I was able to leverage all that to do it for a tenth of that. And so but that's also going to change the capabilities and the people that I want around me, and so the people I want around me are also going to be AI enabled, as it were, to have the best judgment and to know what we're doing. And so it's not necessarily that it's going to replace people, but it's going to make people better, and it's going to challenge everyone to really be the best person they can be, not just because you have lots of competition, but also because of how it can help all of us really help the world and obviously make a living at the same time.
Yeah. Like, I thank you for sharing with me in the audience about that, because there is tremendous savings with the AI tools if you use them properly, and yes, it can enhance our business. I'm finding it very useful for me right now. But I look at how do I become a better person for AI? What can I learn from it to be able to help with the number of years that we've sacrificed in this industry? And I could see on the ingredient side what you're doing with Fearless Naturals, that you're trying to find the best ingredients for the industry to be able to simplify the process by only picking the best of the best, right? We've they go through a process of high quality standards that you're setting, and I've seen that. And I thank you for doing that. And you're using the best analytical tools to make sure that they're not adulterated. Thank you for doing that. But at the same time, some of the best science-based ingredients never will be sold to the consumers, because they just get squeezed out because of the retail margins. It's a high-priced item, and it just belongs, maybe in a different, a different health channel, like a practitioner health channel. But e-commerce is a future. I could really see the e-commerce play for consumers, because they can now have better choices of product availability, and AI has been very helpful in that area. What do you think about that, Blake?
Yeah, that's totally true. And so, before a business owner or a product developer or a marketer might not have been able to know how they're positioned price-wise, whether they're too expensive or the right price or whatever. Now with AI, you can get that answer. And so, same thing with, hey, if you're developing a scientific ingredient, is it competitive? Well, I mean, it might have taken me weeks beforehand to come up with a report, and still it might have not been fully accurate. But now with AI, we don't have an excuse for bad answers, or at least uninformed answers anymore. And so it is forcing everyone to be smarter about their business decisions, because everybody has this capability to understand, well, is what we're doing right? Obviously, AI isn't going to take care of everything, because you need people who really understand the metrics and the criteria to do the analysis. And I'm an AI enabled now, where I can do much better analysis than I could even do before, and faster too. And so yeah, like on that part, it's like, hey, we're almost like robots now, super powered robots, and so failure is we have no excuse for failure anymore when it comes to bad decisions.
No, again, I think the power of the AI, to answer your question, Peter, too, it's here to stay. We have to find a way to work with it, and but not let it, use it as a tool, and don't let it control us, right? There's a lot of changes that are going to happen in our industry, which I think will benefit the consumer. And that's what I'm focused on, looking at all the positive that comes from this, right? And certain jobs, yes, will be compromised, right? But at the same time, the opportunities to grow, new jobs will take place. So anyway, that's my 2 cents for the day. So Peter, I just want to thank Blake Ebersole for joining us today. And to our listening audience out there, thank you for tuning in to hear Blake's journey as he shares his success story with us, both personally and professionally. And just another, just saying, Blake, I don't get a chance to see or talk to you too much at the trade shows, because everybody's so focused. But I can tell you right now from this interview, you're a really good human being, and I'm so glad I met you. And the world's a better place with you in here and doing your thing. And I wish you all the best and success with Fearless Naturals. Right? And I'm glad to be part of your journey. And thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much, Stephen. I really appreciate that. And we're only as good as the people around us, and I really appreciate this opportunity. And yeah, not many people ask me where I came from, and so it's great to share that and have that out there. So
yeah. Thank you to your mom and dad. They've done a very good job raising you and your sister, and it's like I'm just thankful. All right, that this world's a better place with you in here. So, job well done, Blake.
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome. Peter, take it away, and wishing everybody a fantastic day.
Yep. From Planet Cranberry, you just heard the KISC My Health Radio show, so go to KISCMyHealth.com. That's KISCMyHealth.com. We'll make sure we have show notes on this one from Blake Ebersole, Ebersole, for those people that are looking for the spelling, and we'll make sure we have links to his website and everything else so you'll be able to contact him as well. And thanks for our Building Fortunes Radio corporate sponsors, the active and passive listeners, and Stephen, especially to you, for the time that you spend helping to put together this radio show. We're going to catch everybody next time on KISC My Health Radio.
You've been listening to the KISC My Health Radio show on Building Fortunes Radio. Thanks for listening. This KISC My Health Radio show is brought to you by Stephen Lukawski. Stephen is known as the Cranberry King, universally known as Captain Cranman. Stephen has over 30 years of experience working with manufacturers and marketers of dietary supplements and natural ingredients to make this world a healthier and a better place. You can check out Stephen Lukawski on LinkedIn and on the KISCMyHealth.com website. We are glad you listened in. Spread the word and check out previous KISC My Health Radio episodes. Bye for now. It's been our privilege to have you listen in. At Building Fortunes Radio, we wish you the success you deserve and are willing to work for. Now go make the world a better place.